Welcome, everyone, to our final recap episode of Andor as Art. So, this will be for episodes 10 through 12 of season 2 of Andor. Uh, and I'm here with two wonderful guests, Joseph Tabenkin, whom you might recognize from previous episodes. And Joseph is my dear friend and frequent art conversation partner. And we've also got a junior member from the ISB here, my good friend, lifelong Star Wars fan, and law professor at George Mason University, Adam Mossoff. And what I'd like to do today is, along with all the other recap shows, we'll give our first impressions, dive into our particular highlights, and then discuss this arc of episodes 10 through 12 as a whole, looking at the conflicts and the themes, and then we might have some final thoughts and see where all these characters end up and what we make of their endings. I'm thinking of having at least one more episode where we step back and take a bigger picture look and maybe also integrate Rogue One into the discussion of the Andor story as a whole. But today we're primarily going to focus on episodes 10 through 12. Adam, since this is your first time joining us, I'd love to hear just a quickly about your thoughts about your feelings about Andor as a whole, the show, your experience of it, how you've watched it, how you've enjoyed it, what do you think about it?
Oh, thanks. Well, thank you, Luke and Joseph, for having me on the show, and I'm really excited to talk about this because, I mean, my love for Andor is just so deep. I mean, it really, in a very fundamental way, built out the Star Wars universe in such a deep and artistic way. I've often referred to Star Wars as kind of like light cultural affair compared to kind of deeper art. People would complain, "Oh, how can you be a Star Wars fan? When there's so much deeper art." It's like, well, you can appreciate soda, and soda is not the same thing as having a good Manhattan or a good old fashioned, right? They're for different purposes and for different reasons.
Mm.
But Andor really takes it out of that kind of pop culture, just
Nice pun.
framework, and really makes it a work of art. I mean, thematically, plot, character, and the universe. I mean, it just yeah. I mean, and it really kind of, I mean, the key and the tying into Rogue One is just perfect. Yeah.
Oh, well, you've come to the right place to discuss Andor more deeply and Andor as art, Andor as a Manhattan rather than a cherry soda.
Yes.
Uh,
Can I
okay.
riff on that for a second? Because
Yeah, go
that
ahead.
just connected something.
Yeah.
Because I felt compelled after Andor to go and watch Rogue One and then New Hope. I
Yeah.
just felt like I had to. We'll talk about more of
Yeah.
that later, I'm sure, but I felt I had to see the arc fully through. And one thing I was reflecting on is there are a lot of great themes in all of Star Wars, really interesting ideas that are done in a very pop way. And Andor
Mm.
does it all in an artistic way. And I think you just connected that for me of what I like. And seeing Andor next to Rogue One and New Hope
Yeah.
just solidified that because Rogue One's like this transitionary movie where you can see two souls fighting each other, like
Yeah.
the soul of Tony Gilroy and maybe the more pop, like they had to make a movie for theatrical release.
Yeah.
And so you get little glimpses of what's in Andor, but they just let him run it. And
Yeah.
so. Yeah, that was a great way to put it. That, Star Wars is pop, but with some really nice ideas in it and some interesting storylines. And then Andor is just this concentrated art that has it all.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, totally. And I like that two souls fighting with each other, and maybe that's something we'll discuss with Rogue One. Okay, so I want to go through and I want to focus on these three episodes, 10 through 12. And the titles of the episodes are, just to recapture a little bit here. Episode 10 is Make It Stop. Episode 11 is Who Else Knows? And episode 12 is Jeddah, Kyber, Urso. So, first, just some general impressions about these episodes, how you felt about them compared to the other arcs, um, and whether it felt like a satisfying ending to Andor for you. And Adam, would you go ahead and share?
Sure. I mean, incredibly satisfying because this was the resolution of of the story. And it's only satisfying though if you remember that it's a transitional story, right? So it's leading
Mm.
up to Rogue One, right? So if you went into it expecting a final resolution, kind of a tying together of all of the plot lines and incredible conflicts that had been developing over the course of the past 12 total 12 episodes, but then the 9 episodes leading up to it, I think you might feel a little unsatisfied, but if you remember, but this is, I mean, as Joseph said, I mean, I actually had to stop myself from immediately starting to watch Rogue One because it literally ends where Rogue One picks up. So, um, I just I it but it took, the six different storylines or however many different storylines that had been running concurrently through the series and really did tie those up very nicely. With Deidre and Bix and tying up the development and evolution of Cassian into the person that we were first introduced to in Rogue One. So I really, yeah, I felt that they were excellent and
Mhm.
incredible resolution of an intermediary bridge uh, show or a piece of art, I should say.
Yeah. Okay. So then for you, you're almost thinking like Rogue One is the button on this on all of Andor's story, and
Yeah.
that this is still a bit of a transition going into Rogue One, and you should calibrate your expectations if you're going into these 3 episodes knowing that you're not going to get a full resolution to the Cassian Andor story. So maybe
Right.
one question that we're going to have as we're discussing this is which of the characters' arcs do have a full resolution, and then which ones are still left hanging for Rogue One.
I mean, I will say very
Yeah.
quickly, before Joseph jumps in that, so this is in some ways, similar to The Empire Strikes Back, right?
Mm.
Which is a bridge story, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't really stand on its own. I mean, and many of us recognize from the original Star Wars generation, that we love Empire Strikes Back, but you have to go into it with the right expectations. My wife, who's not as much of a Star Wars fan as I am, she dislikes Empire Strikes Back for that reason. It's just a bridge
Mm.
story. It's
Mhm.
not a
Mm.
self-standing work of art. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Adam. How about you, Joseph? What were your impressions? Did you also feel like this was a bit of a transition episode or set of episodes to go into Rogue One?
Yeah, I would echo what a lot of what Adam said. Like it was on its own and as a whole, the whole season 1 and 2 were the whole arc, right? Feels like the perfect piece that needs to slot in to Rogue One and New Hope and the rest of it. Um, so I feel very satisfied with the completion of the arc. I have some mixed feelings about uh, were all the things I wanted answered
Mm.
in within the arc? Are there, I shouldn't say answered. There were glimpses of details I'm still trying to process.
Hmm.
Like, did he give me enough explicit details that I was hoping for? Or am I going to have to go back and rewatch them and find them, which I'm going to do anyways and thoroughly enjoy. And I'm just hoping that they're there. And I have a lot of trust that on rewatches, I'm going to see so much more than I saw on the first watch. So I'm still processing, how was the style as a whole in terms of the, getting 1 year chunks of scenes. What were the pros and cons of that? There's
Hmm.
some thoughts I have there, but yeah, as a whole, it felt so satisfying. One interesting thing though is I could not feel satisfied until I watched A New Hope because one of the dominant questions in the whole season, but especially towards the end of this last chunk, is make it worth it. And you see that echoed in Rogue One, and it just is all a waste unless they destroy the Death Star.
Mm.
And so, even though it was a little jarring to watch A New Hope and that style in contrast to Rogue One and Andor, I felt just compelled, and I finished it last night. Because I just had to see that arc. Like to me, Andor's arc is not completed until the Death Star is destroyed.
So, what did that do for you to complete it like that? How did that help you enjoy Andor and those that last arc more?
Well, it made it worth it, right? It makes
Yeah.
everything they do, ultimately, Andor ends up dying. And he's doing it for this, what Dick said, we have to win. And all of the things everyone does in all of Andor to try and get to that conclusion,
Hmm.
um, ultimately it was, well, I guess, the full arc will be Return of the Jedi,
Hmm.
but even at least A New Hope,
Hmm.
because that's a little bit more directly tied to their actions.
Yeah, Joseph, I felt as well like even finishing Rogue One wasn't enough because then that also just
Yeah, that's it.
transitions right into A New Hope. So after I share kind of some of my impressions, I would love to like then hear some of the questions that you have, maybe Joseph and Adam, maybe some of the things that you felt like these were the points that were resolved, but maybe what were the points that were not resolved by the last arc of Andor. And maybe those can be a basis for then when we after we do our highlights, we can get into maybe kind of answering these questions. So, what are the questions, the loose ends, the threads, the moments that you're kind of confused by, or just overall for me, one big question after I first watched it because I watched my first watching of any arc is in a drunken stupor. I just let it flow over me, and then afterwards I've got to rewatch it. But after that first watch of my first thought is, wait, what is this about? What is this 3 episode arc about on its own, separate from being a setup for Rogue One? So that was one of the big questions I had going into it. And one thing I've had to get used to, and I talked about this a little bit the last time for the last episode of the podcast, is I've had to get used to the fact that it is broken up and that there's a year gap, about a year gap between these episodes. But also there's a kind of gap between the what is emphasized in each story. So I came out of the last arc thinking, all right, Cassian has just been told that he's a savior and he's resistant to it. And my thought was, oh, okay, will that play out some way in this arc of episodes? Will that be an important part of Cassian's character development? And it really wasn't. There were hints at it, but that part of the symphony, that theme of the symphony was kind of subdued down. I had a notion that, okay, there was let's see, there was going to be the Death Star, and Luthen was probably going to be a part of that. But what I didn't expect is how much Luthen's story became very important in this arc, and how much Luthen's story became important not just in maybe my favorite standalone episode of the series, episode 10, with Clea and Luthen and their relationship and his sacrifice, his ultimate sacrifice, and also his ultimate saving of what matters to him. So, but that story of Luthen also kind of seems to keep going, and the rest of the arc looking at Luthen's legacy and how do you judge Luthen's legacy. So, to that extent, I was kind of starting to be satisfied. Like, all right, each of these arcs has a different kind of push. Last time it was more Cassian. This time Cassian is his internal conflict seems to have been resolved essentially by Bix's choice to leave. She made the choice for the both of them. And now we're litigating Luthen. And Cassian is in the middle of litigating Luthen and litigating something that has been a conflict for him throughout the arc, his relationship to Luthen.
Mm.
So I I feel like on the one hand, I if there was another batch of episodes, I'd say, okay, what's going to be the next kind of thematic conflict here? And I wouldn't be surprised if I were surprised and that there wasn't a kind of flow of expectation. So I'm starting to see this second season as fundamentally different in storytelling than the first season. The first season were dominoes dropping one after another, and it was all about how will Cassian evolve into a scumbag to a rebel dedicated to a cause. And in this season, I'm still maybe next time we'll talk a little bit more about the overall arc, but it felt like there were certain things that were lifted for each separate arc. And maybe something the overall thing is, all right, what is the role of a Luthen within a rebellion? Is he necessary or not? Is it important to have him? Is it moral to have him? How do we know? So that's kind of where I am. In some
Can I
parts,
push back on you on some of that?
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I 100% agree with you that like on Cassian's arc is resolved in this in the middle episodes, right? Those
Yeah.
the second set of three episodes. And that he finally accepts that he's a savior, and then there were hints maybe he's force sensitive.
Mm,
Uh um and I think in these three episodes, he's showing that he has accepted he is a savior. That's why he's willing to go and save Clea. That's why he's willing to take on the Rebel Alliance leaders so aggressively, because he has and the end of the episode is him kind of the very end of the episode, the end of the last episode of the season, right, is him confidently
yeah.
walking in his uniform through Yavin and seeing all the different, Melshi and the Force healer and and it's such a contrast from the first season of him where he's think as Luthen Sansa says to him, you're thinking like a thief. You're just a thief. You're out, you're not, you're the, he's the, Humphrey Bogart type character, right? And he's I'm amoral. I don't particularly care. I'm just out for this for myself. And that I mean, that last scene of him walking to his U-wing, right? To
Mhm.
go to meet Tivik,
Yeah.
which is the start of Rogue One. I mean, I mean, to me, that was like, you're right. He had the conflict. He resolves it. I'm committed. I made my choice. That was that was his scene with Clea, right? I made my choice. I left Luthen because I joined the rebellion. I know, and I wanted to be this person. That I was conflicted, and I did it.
Mhm.
So I was actually very satisfied with that I saw it resolving that storyline for him
Mhm.
that had been running from the very first season. In fact, I went back and rewatched some of the episodes from the first season after this.
You've got to,
And
right? You've
yeah,
got to. Yeah.
especially because I disagree with you a little bit about Luthen,
Yeah.
and one of the because I saw the focus on Luthen as the tying up of what he understood from the very beginning, that he himself initially was fighting making this choice, right? And you saw that in the scene where he meets Clea and he's working for the Empire and he's killing people. I have a choice. And I went and rewatched that speech he gave to Lonnie, right? With that line that I always
Mm.
love, the I burn my life for a sunrise I'll never see. He knew he was going to die. He knew
Mhm.
that what was going, I mean, and that was the thing. He knew it. He knew that it was a result. It was a choice that he made, and he was going to face it and
Yeah.
accept it. It was really powerful.
Uh, Totally agree. Joseph, do you have any thoughts on what Adam is saying or about
Yeah.
um, what Cassian's storyline and the feeling of whether it's been completed or it's kind of hanging or you were expecting something more with that and with Luthen's storyline, whether this
Yeah,
is
so I
kind of like,
think
yeah.
yeah, and I can finally put my finger, I think, on what tension I felt about it or conflict I felt, because I feel weirdly satisfied and dissatisfied together. And I think the reason why there's some dissatisfaction is season one was all about the details. You got to see, like you said, Luke, the step-by-step process internal towards kind of the resolution of this internal conflict through Cassian. I think just by the nature of how this season was split up with these year gaps, is there are lots of details within each block, but then jumps are made. So a great example, when we first watched the first three episodes, one of the questions we had that we were kind of pondering, but whether they might show us how this resolves is how does a band of rebels coalesce? How do they come together? And we thought, oh, maybe that will be something they tease out. Like, how do you get all these factions? And then one of the first kind of experiences of disappointment was I can't remember exactly in which block it was, but we just jumped towards Yavin and everyone's there and it's a base and they're all of a sudden united because we have this year gap and sometime within
Yeah.
that year, lots of little things probably happened that created that coalescing. But we didn't get to see that. And
Yeah.
we didn't get to see what Tony Gilroy thought of that. Now, I suspect there are lots of details in what we do get to see that inform that. That will just take some rewatching. Every episode is so packed. But like you said, watching it once for the first time is just this fever dream of entertainment. Like I couldn't breathe for 3 hours every time I sat down to watch these.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to digest and process all of that. So I feel very confident going back to it, but having, I haven't rewatched, I don't think,
Mhm.
any of the episodes. So having just gone through it once, that's the only bit of maybe dissatisfaction is we didn't get to see that same sort of detailed step. In fact, we got big jumps and it was hard to extract those details in real time.
Yeah.
But I do feel, but on the other side, I feel completely satisfied that like they gave us enough of kind of the points, the big points that each of the characters went, that I don't feel like any of it was a contradiction or at odds with this entire arc from Andor season one to A New Hope. It all feels very integrated and complete. There are just things I want to see and go
Yeah.
back and yeah.
And to follow up on that, and I like that example of okay, here those rebels that are the doofus boys on Yavin, and then it kind of jumps, and we don't get how that happened. And I, like you, it's like the question was planted. All right, so are we going to see the step-by-step process in which a motley crew of lost boys becomes an allied rebel alliance? And we don't really see that step-by-step process because I think each arc has a different theme, has a different intention. And it's not the intention that you might have thought was laid out beforehand. Because after the motley crew of rebels, what we get is we go to Gorman and we go to, okay, uh, how does this group of revolutionaries or insurgents, starting off as a French political party, become a group that will fight the empire, and then how does the empire make use of that through the faking of reality, and that becomes a dominant theme in those middle episodes. So to go back to the Cassian, I remember at the end of the last arc where Cassian with Bix leaves, I still had a little bit of a thought: are we going to keep going with Cassian's, because he's left there kind of on the tarmac looking around, wondering, and then he's called into, okay, hey, you got to help us with this robot over here that we got. So my lingering question is, will the next arc explore more deeply Cassian's relationship to the Force and his reluctance to be known as a savior, to view himself as a savior? And I think you're right, Adam. We don't. He is confident. He knows his place. He's there playing whatever space poker with K2, I think is the name of the
K2,
robot.
K2SO, yeah.
Yeah,
And Elshi.
K2 and Milshi, and he's comfortable, he's happy, and he's happy that Bix is gone because she's safe. And so and he sees his purpose and he's fully on board with the Yavin revolt, and he's fully not on board with the Luthen side of things. So we've got a settled character. So going into this last arc, I kind of had to, okay, accept I'm not getting the internal conflict there for casting anymore. And then what I do get, and this is what Joseph, that I've had to calibrate my mind for, I look for what I've got to pick up quickly. What is it that this is focusing on? And I didn't pick up quickly enough for this arc, but it was in the second watch that I saw, all right, for me now, this is Luthen's arc.
Mhm.
This is the end of Luthen's story.
Mm.
And we saw Luthen, and he's been referred to from the very beginning. And now I'm kind of starting to see kind of maybe the whole of Andor separate from Rogue One, and especially this last batch as the completion of Luthen's story.
Mm.
And then Rogue One becomes the completion of Andor's story. So I'd like to go into some specifics now,
Yeah.
getting into the nitty gritty of the episodes. And but from your perspective, what were some particular moments that like gave you a jolt of a tear or a chuckle or like an OMG? And jump on in if you've got one.
Yeah.
Go for it,
Um,
Adam.
I will answer that question, but very quickly,
Yeah,
I mean, some of what you're talking about, which is exactly right, right? These 1 year jumps and not getting it is a byproduct that they took what was going to be 4 seasons and compressed it
yeah,
into one,
that's true.
right? I mean,
That's true.
and when you remember that, right? And then look at what they achieved with it,
Yeah,
it's like, wow,
it's a
like,
master class in
I mean,
expository dialogue that just flows through.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, and I should be clear, like, I don't think I'm disappointed at all.
yeah,
I just want more. I
yeah,
want like
yeah,
I he's so brilliant at like creating something incredibly entertaining. That's what blew me away is like I said, I couldn't breathe every episode set. There were moments where I just like
yeah.
the entertainment factor was off the charts, but also the dialogue, like the lines were incredible, the art just, and also then not just the dialogue, but the glimpse into aspects of humanity. Like that's what art's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so I just want more. I
Mhm.
thought I'm just curious to know what else this guy sees. I want to know what else he can share with me. And so, call that disappointment. Maybe like I would have loved for them to
Yeah.
do 4 seasons, but
Oh yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Like
Well,
like what they
Well,
did do was
yeah.
incredible.
Well, let's pick
all right.
up from details
Right.
from this buffet that we've
Yes.
got.
Um, so I loved um uh the plot uh mechanism when Marrow finds out about Axis. Because when it first happens, you're like, oh come on, this is like right out of, the prequels. It's just kind of like, like the Ghost in the Machine, and just like, oh, now the story moves, and now, Anakin chooses the dark side. Why? Because the Emperor told him to. It's like, really, that's all it took? So, but then, oh, Krennic's interrogation. Oh my God. Oh, and that line. Oh yeah, when he pushes on her head, you can. And I was actually, I was like, that hurts. That hurts when someone does that to you. And um, and when he says to her, "Oh, what a combination of enthusiasm and competency." Which, by the way, if you remember back to Partagas saying to Cyril, "What an interesting combination of enthusiasm and incompetency." Right? And Cyril doesn't catch that he's referring to him because Cyril thinks he's is describing the Gorman rebels.
I like that you're calling out kind of the mirroring lines
Ah,
coming up in
yes.
again with each other. Yeah,
And
yeah.
and then you find out and this goes back, Joseph, you're just how robust the dialogue is, how rich it is. And I mean, and this is, I mean, Andor is like the old school classic, Humphrey Bogart films where you are
Oh, I like that connection.
if you fa if you drift out for even 30 seconds, you're going to be lost. I
That's a
mean,
great
every
connection. Yeah,
line
yeah,
matters.
yeah.
I mean, and so it's in there you discover, like, she in that one little compact interview how she found access,
Mhm.
right? I mean, and being the scavenger, and having, and reading the things that were not supposed to be sent to her, and how this ends up. I mean, and how it
Well,
all.
as an ISB agent yourself, I'm not surprised that you picked that as a favorite. Let me get to Joseph, and I'll come back to you, Adam. What's a favorite of yours, Joseph?
Um, Probably the Clea rescue scene. Just how they interplay the flashbacks. Um,
Oh, wait. Clay, a rescue scene, not Cassie
oh, sorry,
rescuing
sorry,
her.
not rescue. I shouldn't say rescue. I think of
Maybe
it
in some
rescue
ways you
because
should. Maybe in some ways you should.
I guess when she kills Luthen, but the whole sequence leading up to it, how competent she is, the flashbacks that you get, the glimpses into the relationship, how significant of a moment it's going to be. I thought it was brilliant. The just before she presses the button how it's flashing back to when Luthen presses it for her. That really stood out for me.
Mhm.
So, why did that stand out for you, Joseph? Especially maybe that button moment, but the competency. I mean, what is Hirt, Supervisor Hirt? He says there were three. This is the work of
Yeah,
three people.
right. You discover it's just her. Um, I think I think it was just so brilliantly done in terms of how it builds the tension. So entertaining,
Yeah,
right? Couldn't breathe. It was one of those scenes that he gave us throughout the show, but also just masterful and magical to see how he interweaves like this tension building and entertainment factor with also giving you a lot of interesting details about their relationship and, you know, little simple things to help increase the significance of the moment and what's happening. And making when she ultimately has to kill him even more of a gut punch.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, uh, Joseph, for me, that episode was, as I mentioned before, it was maybe my favorite standalone episode in the whole series. I'll point out one of my favorite moments from that episode, and it was a moment that first confused me, and then in retrospect made me tear up. And it was it's got that brilliant line, but it's not this particular line when they get the signal from Lonnie and that he's got to go out, and Clea says, "Okay, if it's not perfect, don't go." And he says, "I think we used up all our perfect, and we know that this is a dire situation." And then he says this one simple word to her, and it was really surprising how emotional she got. That like severe Mascovers broke up when he said, "Move." And I was thinking, like, she's in your way? What's going on? Why are you telling her? Because I had to rewind to, it says it so quietly to read the subtitles. Move? And it didn't hit. I was like, I kept it filed away. What the heck is going on here? But later in that episode, when he's there with then the flashback and he's telling the young Clea after she witnesses the execution of these villagers that have been picked out, and especially that kid who's defiantly looking back, he tells her, okay, what we do is we lose and we lose and we lose and then we win. We've got to keep losing. Bank up all your hate. Okay, save it. And then when I tell you to move, you move. And then it hit me that this is the ultimate moment and also the moment that at that second he's recalling their bond that goes back years, the way that he's instructed her that now this is it. This is the ultimate moment where everything that we've done is for this. And also, I remember that you are my daughter. That we have this bond for years, and this is a that one
Mm.
simple word just illuminates that and brings it up to mind, and that's why her mask breaks, and just recalling her mask breaking when I heard that speech that he gives in the childhood, that he's got a heart. So that was a favorite moment of mine. Adam, do you have another one that you want to share?
Oh yeah. So uh the 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 theme of no margin for error, and then which is constantly stated, and then the tying in with Nemec's manifesto about how brittle authoritarianism is, how unnatural it is. Um, I mean, and that's exactly the problem for them, right? I mean, and that they because it's so it's so unnatural, it's so irrational, it's so that they don't have a margin for error because they can't, and because they can't have a margin for error, they can never succeed because any minor defect, sets into motion a whole series of consequences that they can't control. And and so you know that Dedra constantly thinks that she's in control. She's so tightly wound up in control. It's something I loved about her from the very first season. How just like tight her hair is and how perfect her uniform. I mean, and yet she even at the end of the day can't do it. And by the way, the closing scene of her, right, in the prison is her breaking down, finally showing emotion, no margin for error anymore because she is now just she's it's all caught up with her. It's it was there was one of the reasons why I really love these last three episodes. My favorite episode was the ninth episode,
Mhm.
the Welcome to the Rebellion, and or the eighth and the ninth combined. The but I mean, but the book ending of these last three episodes with, the early, the first season, so many, and realizing the issues, the revival of Nemec's manifesto. And when you were hearing the words, and then it turns out that Partagas is listening to it.
Yeah.
Uh, and again, no margin for error. What happens to Partagas because of what happened? And errors happened, mistakes were made. And why were mistakes made? Well, because they couldn't have foreseen that Cassian would have a K2SO, and Alan Tiddick as K2.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that I'm
Well,
so
can I pick out one particular moment? I'll ask you about
yeah,
this, Adam, because it dovetails with one of my highlights.
yeah,
Hearing Nemec's manifesto being listened to by Partagaz,
yeah,
and there's that exchange with, I think his name is Gertz, his lieutenant there at the ISB, and we learn that this has been spreading. Now,
Mm.
there's one line by Partagaz that really hit me, and I don't know why. And I'm curious if you have, Adam and Joseph, you have any thoughts. Is when he asked, kind of really curiously, sincerely, who do you think wrote this?
Mm.
hmm,
And so that kind of got me, and I was wondering if did that hit you too? Who do you think it is? He says, as he's listening to this, which is basically telling him, what the line I picked out was authority is brittle, oppression is the mask of fear. And
hmm,
it basically kind of seeing how, Adam, as you're describing, all of this is applied to him. He has been trying to control. And I'm going back to the
yeah,
very first
season,
season and the first moments we see Partagaz so in control of that room.
yeah,
We are here to stop.
infections.
We healthcare. This is what we
We're
do,
healthcare.
and we're, yeah, start this infection, whatever it starts. It's so confident, and now we can kind of see in his face as he's breaking down, and he's got this
Mhm.
curious, like, who do you think it is that wrote this?
Mm.
Yeah,
Any thoughts as to, did that hit you? And do you have it? Why did that hit me? Help me answer this question for myself.
that's a great question. Yeah.
I'll throw
It
out a
didn't, it
theory.
didn't, it didn't, it didn't hit me. It didn't hit
Yeah.
me, but you got me thinking about it. I mean, Joseph, I don't know if you have a reaction.
Now, give the theory like that you have.
I I'm wondering if at this moment he's kind of having like a reconsideration of his life.
Mm.
Like at this moment, like there is truth here. From what now I've lived in my experience, there's, to the extent that he can see it, because he is somebody who is very competent, very focused on the truth, on like cutting through the BS when he's talking to everyone. And now almost this manifesto is the one cutting through his BS, and he's starting to see, like, who could have possibly done this. And also, there are layers to this, because this relates also to the sacrifice and anonymity of those that started the rebellion that we see played over and over again. People don't even know what Luthen has done, and the people are all claiming that they were on Aldani when they weren't, and they don't remember, and they're like, just so much of the rebellion that started is gone, including Nemec, but the spirit is still there. And so you've got that. Who is this guy? There's no name attached to it, but also, well, we might talk about a little bit about the endings of the characters. But for me, this was like the perfect ending for Partagaz. In that question, who do you think it is? He's reconsidering almost his entire life because he knows he's going to commit suicide. This is his Javert moment in a way.
Yeah. You know,
So
oh, go ahead, Joseph. Yeah.
I don't know if I have an answer yet, but some things that come to mind are Okay, who is this guy? He's the head of ISB, right? So his whole job is intelligence, of being informed, of knowing who people are.
Mhm.
That's his mission, right? Know everything. Know find the infections, diagnose them, eradicate them. And then you also think about so that's his mindset where they're coming from. And you also contrast that with some things Cassian says in season one early on, and his awareness of the nature of the brittleness of the Empire, or one aspect of it, which is they're so arrogant. They don't they don't
Yeah.
actually look at the details, right? They don't look at people or
They
think
don't look
about it.
down.
And so
They
they
don't
don't look
bother to
down.
listen.
They don't see the
So
individual.
Yeah.
yeah, so I wonder, I'm less, and this is just like maybe a predisposition not to have as much confidence people can make drastic shifts. If they've been evading for so long, it's very hard to all of a sudden like change that, at least in real life, maybe not in art. We've seen lots of examples in art. And so my tendency would be to wonder like this guy whose whole job has been to know things can't even explain how this message that is now
Oh, that's another layer
like
to it. Yeah,
across the
yeah, yeah.
universe.
It's his job to know where everything is going on, what's happening everywhere. It's his intelligence's job, and this has been one of the mysteries that has eluded him as well.
Yeah, and this whole system where they have these processes and procedures and security codes and clearances to protect it, and yet the
This is
rebel has
spreading.
flourished under this, right? The rebel has grown and is
This is a
gaining momentum.
disease that he's been unable to contain.
Yeah, and so I wonder if he's thinking, because I didn't pick up on that question in the moment, so this is just
Yeah,
Mhm.
a
yeah.
little bit of blindly reaching, but
Good, good. This is
I
great.
mean,
So let's keep going. Let's keep going. Joseph, do you
yeah.
have another? Oh, Adam, you want to say something real quick about
I don't
that?
know. I don't mean to cut off
Yeah, go.
Joseph if he's on a roll. So don't
mm,
let me stop you. But yeah. Well, I mean, from what you were saying, also it keyed into the one of the things that I loved about episode. I think it was eight, where that was the episode where the breakout on Gorman, right? The final
Mhm.
rebellion, the
Yeah.
final act of destruction of Gorman, right? I summarized that episode as "Am I the baddie?" for Cyril, because
Yeah.
mm,
that's whole Cyril's revel. Have I been the baddie?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
oh my God, I am the baddie. And that's that whole scene with him in the plaza. I am the baddie. I did this. And
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
and so maybe, again, each of the tying up of these particular storylines, these threads, which are tied up, which is what's beautiful about this show, is that it's a bridge show, but at the same time, there are individual storylines and character arcs that do tie up. Is that each of the bad people is it it has come to the realization at the end of their story arc about that about, oh my God, I made a mistake, right?
Yeah.
Cyril's realization in Gorman, and I think that's also when Miro was starting to realize too, because all of a sudden there was that was when she really started to show a breakdown in her control and her.
Yeah, so we'll get to Deidre Miro in a little bit,
Okay,
and
and
because
then
I think
yeah,
what's interesting, Adam, is I like that you're thinking about these three villains in comparison to each other, and the question I'm going to be curious to ask is how are they slightly different from each other?
yeah,
These
yeah,
three villains. So Joseph, I want to get one more highlight from you that you've got because one about these highlights is we kind of mushroom outwards. It's fun to like see the detail and then see what it implies, and then after that we'll kind of get into like, okay, what are the big picture things more?
well, my the highlight I had in mind was about Deidre, so maybe that's a good
Yeah, go for it.
transition into her discussion. But I love that we got a glimpse into her rationale for being enthusiastic about the Empire, or maybe idealistic in that. So when she's confronting Luthen,
Yeah.
she says, "You want chaos, right?" Kind of, she has this like idea in her mind that it's anarchy on the Empire is order and discipline and functioning. And because that's an interesting question. Like, I always am curious about is how do tyrannies in general harness competent people? Because they need to in order to survive. And the long term of tyranny is it eventually eliminates all of those people. But here we're still at the earlier stages, and so Deidre is competent, right? Creative and determined, and so and um,
Oh, you're broken up, Joseph.
she
There's yeah. Let's
is
see.
so determined.
Okay, Joseph, we missed 5 seconds there of what you said.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my microphone was doing. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
No, just so the point is you get a glimpse into why she's so enthusiastic about the Empire and what she sees as like she doesn't see them as good, that she's not a nihilist who's trying to squash out something that she knows is good. She sees it as chaos and disorder on the other side. And so you get a glimpse into her motivation.
You disgust me.
Yeah.
She feels disgust, and then I like what I like a lot what Luthen responds to that. You're too late. The rebellion has flown, and his line. I think this is his victory line. This is the line that got me. His victory line is, "There's a whole galaxy out there to disgust you."
Yep.
All right. So thanks for sharing those
Oh, yeah.
individual highlights. And that was a very much like villain centric. So let's maybe talk a little bit. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Those are the storylines that get resolved, and I mean, because the heroes continue on.
That's true. But there's one hero that definitely doesn't continue on, and that's Luthen.
Yeah.
So, um, what did you make of this story of Luthen in that episode 10? And we get the flashback that he was, a former soldier. I don't know the lore or anything or who he's fighting for. We just know that he's committing atrocities, and then he finds Clea. And after that interaction with Dedra, he tries to commit suicide, but he's unable to complete the job. And then Clea, when she sees that, she's got to kill him. And it becomes an espionage thriller as she tries to infiltrate the hospital in order to kill him. And we're getting kind of the packaged relationship between the two. So, what did you think of that relationship between Clea and Luthen? Did it help to explain to you and make it meaningful for you that final moment where she kisses his forehead after she kills him? So, Adam, how did you feel about that episode, about Luthen's end, and about Clea's role in it and their relationship? A daughter when it's convenient.
Yeah. I know. I lie. Get used to it.
Yeah.
Oh, it was incredible because that's because that relationship, right, is one of the open questions that you immediately have when they're introduced in season one, right? Is kind of like, well, like, is she just work for him? Are they romantically involved with each other or not? And the fact that they made it a father-daughter relationship was just perfect, right? Um, that he trained her, that he raised her, and I think and her, that whole episode of her infiltrating the hospital, like, that's the client, that she is the climax of everything that he bequeathed to
Ah,
her as her father.
yeah,
Um,
I like that point a whole lot.
I
That
mean,
this is his greatest triumph in a way.
yeah, she's oh, remember in Rogue One, Joseph, you just watched it, right? When Jin is talking to the Rogue One soldiers on the ship, she says, one will be 10 and 10 will become 100, right? And they think she's
Right.
three
Mm.
when she's attacking the hospital, right? Because she's so good. But my favorite scene in that was the scene where they first take action and they're in that cafe and they had set the
Mm.
bombs.
Yeah, I had questions about that. I was
Yeah,
wondering.
well,
I'd watched it several times, and it still
yeah.
kind of confuses me. So, Adam, what do you enjoy about that scene?
Oh,
And
so
Joseph, you mentioned the
yeah.
scene earlier too, with both taking the button out, and it's kind of she takes the button out in real time while she's going to blow up the ships near the hospital to cause a distraction in order to kill Luthen, and then she
Mhm.
flashes back to that moment where she's offered the button to blow up the troops on some nice planet that are there, and this seems like it might be the first time that they're going to do it. So, Adam, tell us about that and what you liked about it.
All right, so that was a scene that I had a lot when I first saw it. As we were talking, as we said many times, like I had to watch it again and to really get a better appreciation, I think, for what was going on there and understand it. I mean, so because a big theme of Luthen's character and his arc is choice and
Yeah,
facing the choice. You have choice and facing forthrightly the consequences of your choice, right?
yeah,
I mean, that speech, that first speech he gave to Lonnie, that like, I mean, that just, I mean, when I stunned me, right? I wake up every morning and to face, the truth of an equation that I put in, that I made the choice to implement 15 years ago.
yeah.
Um, and you know, and in that scene, right, he is saying to her, "You have a choice. You've been wanting to take action, but it's not the want. Don't think of the want as a necessary, logical requirement. You still have the choice. And I'm giving you the opportunity to make it. Um,
I love that. Yeah, and to follow up on that a little bit, Adam, to he is saying because for him, like I love that you're calling back that speech 15 years ago. I made a choice, and it was an equation that is leading me down this path to where I'm damned. And and he tells her, okay, there's one subtle thing is like
mhm.
look around at the people here having fun. They have come to a point in their life where they're wearing fancy clothes and enjoying frosty Sundays, and he's telling her something like, "You've life shows you what you stand to lose. Take a look at it. Be very aware of what life has to offer that you are not going to have when you make this choice." So it's not just about, as you said it, your want, your hatred. It's about recognizing that you are pushing something else out of your life. Take a look around you at what it is that you're going to lose.
Mm. So one thing that connects for me is I don't know if I can say this is the theme in this entire season, but there are several moments for sure where you see people at different stages in their rebellion, but also tending to be on the more superficial side, if you will, or the shallow side, or a juvenile side is probably the right way to put it. And you see that most clearly in that scene too, right? One of the signs of youth is impulsivity and like wanting to act, right? And if there's one thing,
Oh.
probably the thing I admire most about Luthen is he seems to be operating in a different level than everyone else,
Like Saw
right?
Gerrera, he's operating on like getting high and like rebellion is insanity, and that's
Yeah,
Wilmon
and
picks up on that, and
and
that's
even
not the
yeah, in
speech that
season
yeah yeah
no, no, in season one you see like Luthen's just trying to get these people to work together, and Luthen, what's so admirable about Luthen is he sees the only goal that matters in this context, and it's it's something I'm going to think about for a long time. Like, is Luthen moral? Is he necessary? Do you need somebody like that in a rebellion, right? But it's interesting to contemplate because there's themes like that in 93 by Hugo in terms of, okay, is it worth doing certain things if the ends are just? And with Luthen, you see, okay, the only thing that matters is the rebellion must win, the empire must fall. And he can see all of everything that's playing out within that context. He's a master at holding context.
lose lose
And
lose lose and
and
win.
then you win.
Yeah.
And in that scene, he's to me, what I see is he's trying to get her to see the bigger context. She's ready to go. Like when he first asked her, "Do you want?" She's like, "Yeah, I'll push the button." Like she goes to grab it. Like she's ready,
Mhm.
but that's not what he wants, right? He's not trying to get her to just. He's trying to take her under his wing, and for him, what that means is she has to see the big picture. So
That's
she
why
has to
that's
grow
why
beyond that.
he that's
He
why
pushes
he
it.
and that's why he now well not just pushes it. He forces her not to look at the thrill of the explosion,
Mm,
but only at the consequences of the explosion, which is the death and the
right.
and the terror that follows from it.
Not the
Again,
release of getting to, not
not
the
the high
cathartic
of the
experience. Yeah, yeah,
yeah
yeah.
of the experience of the immediate boom, but the all the consequences of the choices that you're making and making the boom happen. Yeah.
Okay.
And what I love about those flashbacks too, in that in particular, is, man, it's so relevant to a lot of things I've been thinking about in terms of current events. Because I'm trying to think of more examples. I thought of a really silly real life example, but when the tip of the spear gets forgotten, right? The person who goes in first gets vilified. I mean, you can maybe make the argument like Israel is right now.
Tip of the spear.
Your audio's cutting out again, Joseph. Yeah. I'm going to take
Yeah.
over here for a bit. So leaving a moment to like the real life connections. I want to go back, Adam, to what you were saying about that line, the thrill of looking at what's going on. And we've mentioned it already a couple of times about how these lines are packed with multiple meanings.
Yeah.
So in that moment, it's also kind of like a simple training device. You don't look at the place where the explosion is going to happen because people will see you looking because and they will know that you
Oh,
are anticipating that.
yeah.
Now, also to go back to like the thrill thing, she couldn't stop looking at that kid, the execution of that kid, and that built up hatred, and that goes into like what you were saying about the thrill of seeing they were relying on the emotion of the things, either like being horrified by it and building up the hatred, or having the release of the thrill of like, yeah, we're doing it, and that plays into no, be more calculating, be more long term, and also I think there might be one more thing in that, and maybe it's not completely clear, but I like to kind of tie it in and maybe suggested a little bit because the thing that he tells her at that Sunday eating session is look around you at all the things that we stand to lose. We are not going to be doing this anymore. We're not going to be hanging out on a beautiful day at a bridge enjoying something like this anymore. This is what we're going to lose.
Mhm.
And when he tells her to don't look over there, look at me, there is a suggestion there that one of the things that you stand to lose
It's me.
is me. And I don't think it's an accident that she's recalling that moment of pushing the button with the previous moment of pushing the button in the context of after she pushes that button in the hospital and blows up and she's going in to kill him. She is recalling the most important lesson that he taught her. You've got to have the courage to not just act on the thrill, the desire of rebelling, being high on it, but of recognizing that you need to lose the things that life has to offer you for the cause, and that includes look at me,
Yeah.
your father.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think what I love so much about these scenes is when we're first introduced to Luthen, and for most of our interactions with Luthen, we're seeing the final form of Luthen, right? Luthen, who's mastered, right, the art of holding context, focusing, and doing what's necessary. And people like that are often vilified as
And then,
heartless
and Joseph, I
as
think this is a good transition, and then we'll pick up some of the thoughts that you had before you cut out just briefly. Let's get into the second half of the episode. So we have or the arc. So we have Cassian and Clea together, or Cassian defies orders, defies Yavin in order to save Luthen.
Yeah.
And I'll come because he says, I went to save my old friend. That's his justification. He goes, and Clea and he have a clash. Clea there is saying, I don't want to go to Yavin. I'm not with these people. It's your job. I'm delivering this message. My life doesn't matter right now. This message, you've got to deliver it. And Cassian is just impassive. He says, you're coming to Yavin. What are you talking about? You're coming. I'm saving you. Um, and just to kind of gloss over in the limited time we have here, but just to say, I love the line where he comes in through the door and she says, "It had to be you, wouldn't it?" And that just reinforces kind of like, okay, he just goes around saving people, and he's the one that's there always at the right time, at the right place, and it kind of builds up on the, oh, maybe there's a little bit of force guiding him, but Clea recognizes how important, how heroic he is. Now, when they get back, they've got trouble getting back. Because you know who operates in secrecy besides Luthen? Well, the Rebel Alliance has to as well. And so they're not treated as heroes. There are 50 guys with guns pointed at them as they come down. And this is not the heroic welcome that Clea gets. And that's presages the antipathy that everybody has towards Luthen. So one thing I want to do a little bit better job. I've got to replay all the horrible things that Luthen has done in my mind to know more clearly why when Cassian gets in front of this council, there is nobody to defend him. Not even Mon Mothma is really standing up. And Bail Organa, who's like in traditional Jedi lore, might be the one character that is like the closest to the Force and the closest to our heroes. He is vehemently anti-Luthen. And when Catherine brings up, hey, Luthen is the one who got Mon Mothma saved through me, is says like duly noted, not enthusiastically. So at this point, it becomes a story of Cassian trying to convince everybody at Yavin that the information that they got about this super weapon is real. And it becomes a litigation not on the specifics of the information, but on whether or not you can trust Luthen. So at that moment, we kind of get, Joseph, as you're alluding to, the story of, is Luthen too far gone to be somebody to be trusted? Is he too twisted? Has he become too amoral that this is a thorn in the side of the rebellion? He's a worse than Saw Gerrera. You can't work with him. You can't trust him. And it was informative that we saw the Saw Gerrera interaction beforehand, where there's just animosity. I mean, Dedra wasn't wrong. There's chaos out there in this rebellion. So here at this point, what did you make of this story this conflict between Cassian trying to convince everybody that Luthen was right? Did that captivate you? Did you see that as kind of, oh, this is an important part of the story? Did you see it as, okay, we're just kind of transitioning over into Rogue One? Were you wondering how would Cassian be able to convince everybody that Luthen was right? What did you feel about that particular conflict and how everybody responded to Luthen? Adam, would you like to jump in with just any thoughts that you had there?
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking of it. So Luthen and Saw kind of each represent these two, Saw is the pure emotional,
Yeah.
whim-driven, the thrill, the chaos, the thrill of the rebellion, and the purest and the pure emotion, right? Luthen is the overthinking, plotting. It's yes. Saw's about tactics and Luthen's about strategy, right? Saw's the immediate moment,
Yeah.
and Luthen is the grand picture. It's kind of the classic reason emotion split that that is often you see that is you see in art and things of that sort. And of course, what may and so Luthen, of course, is much. They have there's a lot more animosity towards Luthen because of that, because he was the person who actually was he doesn't just hang up on you when he gets mad at you. He's the plotting, constantly thinking, strategizing, when that it's it's interesting that the scene that they picked for that was of the previously on the
Mhm.
previously happened was the was when he was arguing with Clay about how there's too many lines of information and we're drowning and we don't you think you're in control but you're not, right? Because he's all controlling all the information,
Yeah.
knowing where everything is, start seeing the consequences, you know 10, 15 steps out.
And that was
um
like 2 or 3 years prior to that moment. And so you can only imagine that,
yeah.
okay, how much more paranoid has he become maybe, and how much of that has become apparent to the other members of the
Mm.
alliance. So I kept trying to keep that in mind as I was watching that. Like, we're not talking about a calm, fully in control Luthen all the time. We've already seen a glimpse of Luthen losing control a little bit, and that was years prior to the moment where so you can I could believe, in season one, I would have had no, like, I would have been surprised if they would have been disbelieving of any information he had. By the point of this moment, I can understand why they might be conflicted
Hmm.
to accept the news. If you imagine if you try and fill in some blanks.
Well, remember,
But I just felt,
but he honestly faces I mean, he lies, and he lies not just to
mm,
Empire, he lies to other rebels, right? He does. I mean,
he
Lonnie,
sent Krieger
who
to his death.
That's
he
right.
sent Krieger to his death. He lied to Lonnie. Remember, so in the scene where he says to Lonnie, like, you have to stay there, right? He
Mm.
calls him a hero. He says, "You need to be our hero. We don't have enough. We don't have enough of them yet. We don't have enough heroes yet." And then he kills him.
Promises were made and they're not kept.
Yes, he promises to take him to Yavin to save his family, and he doesn't, right? And
Mm.
I mean, so because yeah,
And sorry, one really small detail
yeah,
I picked up on is when Lonnie asks, "Where will you take us?"
yeah.
There's like this little pause he does, and
Hmm.
he says Yavin, and I'm like, why would you tell him where and I'm like, oh, he's gonna kill him. Like, and he's making that decision. Because he doesn't say it right away. There's like a little pause, and that's just the, I don't know, brilliant little details of.
I'm gonna go back and rewatch that because because I was the first time I watched that scene, I was like, why is he telling him Yavin? Like this is like that. That's like it's like giving away everything. And then when you see him dead, I was like, ah, yes, of course,
Yeah.
that's why he told him Yavin because he knew it. Then at that point, he was gonna kill him. Yeah. So.
All
Yeah.
right. So what I'm hearing is that the rebel leaders were right to question the legitimacy of the information that Cassian got,
In their
Right,
context.
to have hesitations, I would say.
to
Yeah.
have
I don't
hesitations
think it's
about it.
unfounded. I don't
Yeah.
think it's unfounded.
Yeah.
In their
And
context.
like, and we have to keep in mind, like, we get to see all sides of this thing, but from their perspective in this really maximum stakes situation, how, like, it'd be very challenging to make a decision in that
Yeah.
context. What I found very fascinating about that scene in particular, though, was just how gross the other members of the Alliance are. And like, they've co-opted this movement, but they haven't lived it. And you kind of get that from, like, Cassian's voice. Um, like, who are these people? Some of these people who you see there who we've never met before, and yet they're ready to jump and run and,
Here's a
like,
quote I've got for Cassian because I was real. I like you, Cassian's voice. He's not thinking, oh, they might understand or they have a right to have some trepidation about Luthen. No, here's what he says. He says, it's insulting to hear him run down by people who have given a fraction of his sacrifice to this rebellion. He is vehemently angry at them for like, oh, his
does he
sacrifice for
also say
rebellion.
that they don't even know him? Like, most of them never met
Yeah, you've
Luthen
never met
or,
him. Only Mon
yeah,
Mothma has.
Yeah.
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 He's like,
So
I've seen
Yeah.
the good and the bad of him, right?
Yeah.
I've worked for this guy. Um, I believe him.
So the passion with which Cassian defends Luthen was fascinating to me because Adam, as you brought up before, the um, Cassian is broken from Luthen in the middle episodes. He's
Yeah.
kind of made his choice to leave, and Cassian reiterates that 2 years ago I left. I broke away. I made my choice,
Hmm.
just as Luthen had made his choice to go through and be damned and uh, have his decency destroyed. And Cassian tried to reclaim it, his decency, and to be a part of the the whole alliance, this rebel alliance, rather than the infiltrating, subterfuging, amoral Luthen family. So, but he is coming out fiery defending Luthen. So my question is, why?
So
Go ahead, Joseph. You had something also you wanted to jump in with.
no, that I think it ties into it because I wonder. I don't know if I'll say this is maybe the theme, but this is definitely a theme in the whole series, and I'm trying to think of examples from real life that mimic this. So maybe you guys can help. But when somebody has to make the unpopular decision that we all end up benefiting from, right? Luthen is the embodiment of that, and Cassian's the only defender in this moment of the person who does ultimately what's right, but is not obvious and is unpopular, but and is it's kind of this archetype where they also are tend to be forgotten or vilified after the fact. And I'm trying to think of good examples because I can only think of a really silly example from real life that's not
Go for it.
doesn't do justice to the silly. I'm a fan of hockey, and you often see in hockey, and I'm sure this is with lots of organizations, you see a general manager who makes an unpopular decision in the moment. Maybe they trade away a star player for future
Yeah, yeah.
assets. They get fired because the team doesn't do well. And then years later, all of a sudden the team's doing well because sometimes these decisions that they put in motion have these long-term consequences. And everyone is a fan later on. They're all celebrating, and no one remembers like the person who gets to accept the trophy is never the guy who made the tough decision. So that's like that doesn't feel like it does. I'm trying to think of a better example from
And
that we can use to anchor it, but
that one example kind of lays the groundwork for thinking of other examples. And um, just want to build on that because Cassian becomes the defender of that tip of the spear of the first one who's now looked back upon and vilified. He becomes the defender of that person. And I think Joseph and Adam, this thinking historically or also thematically in terms of other literature and characters, I think we're going to find lots of characters like this that are really, really exciting. I know you just had a revelation, Joseph.
sorry.
Real quick.
Real quick is that is the whole point of Andor, I think. The series, I mean, is Star Wars is like everyone knows Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and Princess Leia as defeating the Empire. Tony Gil and in terms of modern history, everyone knows Reagan is destroying the evil empire. Somebody needs to give a voice to the people that started it, that watered it, that set the foundation for this for the heroes to emerge. 'Cause
So
often
what
those,
you're saying
yeah.
is Cassian right now is explaining kind of the project that Tony Gilroy has with creating the series and writing and or rewriting Rogue One, which is the heroes, but the heroes came because of this infrastructure that was set up. So I'm going to set up now the story, the infrastructure story that will have you lead into the satisfying conclusion of seeing the Death Star blown up by Luke Skywalker. Don't forget all these unheralded and vilified heroes that set it up. Okay, so the question for me: why does Cassian do this? Maybe Cassian, in some ways, is like Luthen. Um, Something else he and Wilman bring up as well is that there wouldn't be any of this. We wouldn't be here. This rebel alliance and a secret base and an army and a navy would not be here if it had not been for Luthen. And that got me to thinking, you know what? at the beginning of the show, I didn't really think of Luthen that way. I thought Luthen was like, he's one person kind of in there, and there might be even people that are higher up that he's got to go to. But Luthen, what we learn, he's the godfather of the rebellion. He's the one that got the money for it, that set up the networking for it, that recruited the best of them, Mon Mothma, Cassian, and now all this that has been set up in Yavin, which before was a haven for kids shooting guns and playing Rochambeau, is now become this military fortress that is ready to take on the Empire. And it's because of Luthen.
He's
So,
also the one who saw that you needed to push people towards a rebellion, right? So
yeah.
part
And
of
that's where the amoral part comes in.
yeah, I mean
Well,
part
that
of the like Gorman and the heist is not just for the money, for example.
It's to have
He
the Empire
wanted
squeeze
like
tighter.
he wanted the Empire to squeeze. He
Yeah.
knew that the death by a thousand cuts wouldn't do it.
Adam, you're looking like you've got a thought there.
yeah. Well, it only seems amoral if you hold it in the short-term context, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, because I mean that's he's thinking strategically. He's thinking long run. He's thinking, you know, what will doom the empire and save the galaxy? And us sitting around waiting for the empire to take various actions at various times is not going to do it. You gotta, you have, people won't respond to that because, it ties into if you talk to people who grew up in the Soviet Union, for instance, they'll say, like on a day-to-day basis, like you just lived your life. You went to work, you came home, you ate. Life sucked, but like, in terms of like to the extent that you knew life sucked in terms of like if you were aware of what you were missing out on in the West, if you had access to some newspapers or something and knew, but in terms of like day-to-day interference with your life, it didn't happen, right? It was that
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
could happen.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
could
Sure.
have the
Yeah.
knock on the door
Yeah.
at 3
Yeah.
a.m.
Yeah.
And when it did, that's when it went really, that's when it was horrible. And Luthen was the one that
Oh,
said, I have to prompt the Empire to
Just
knock
as
on
he,
people's
just as with
doors at
Clea,
3 a.m.
as with Clea and as the kid Clea making that fateful choice, you've
Yes.
got to see what you stand to lose.
And
mm,
by the way, this ties into Marva's speech at the end of season one. We were
mm.
sleeping.
Yeah.
We thought we were just going about our lives. We've been asleep. And she says, if I could do it over again, I'd be fighting those
I
bastards
would be
from
looking at
day
the long
one.
range of this.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
Adam, I
Make,
think what you're sparking for me is maybe a statement towards a theme and
yeah.
why Luthen's story, which I think now is kind of these two seasons,
Yeah.
and the concluding with a TV series, why he's being reclaimed. It's not that okay, he did evil things, he's got the good and the bad. And this is a question I have: how much in the show would capture the kind of theme you're describing, which is don't look at atrocities within a short term. Look at what they mean within the longer term of a war against evil. And by that logic, by that perspective, those new people that just jumped onto the rebel council, they are seen short term, but you have to see the whole line and what it was all for and why they were doing it over the course of years. Lose, 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 lose to win. Okay, so we've got to wrap up soon. But
War is awful, right?
Yeah.
And awful. It's not the natural state of things, and it's when then choice, because it's a huge theme of Star Wars and of the Andor in particular is choice,
yeah,
right? That's why there's no margin for error for authoritarianism because they can't control every choice everyone makes.
Mm. Oh,
Um, and um, and but the choices have to be made, short-term choices have to be made sometimes in wars that are in short-term perspective look awful. An example, classic example of this in history is when they finally broke the Enigma code. They had to let the Nazis actually kill
yeah,
people
yeah. To protect the code.
to protect the code because if
Churchill
they
made that decision.
revealed Yeah, if they interfered with every single operation that the Nazis were going to engage in, the
Yeah.
Nazis would have learned that they had broken the Enigma code. So they had to let some
And
operations
then Joseph, to
occur.
connect that back to what you were thinking, I wonder if there were a lot of commentators who were saying about Churchill that this was something
Yeah.
horrific and we can't trust him and so
I
forth.
mean, very recently we're hearing Churchill's the chief villain in World War II all of
Yeah,
a sudden.
exactly.
All right. You guys have to go soon, but real quick, can we take 5 minutes to do kind of a quick look at the endings of different characters and just
Yeah,
Yes.
to,
yeah, I'd love to do
Yes.
that.
okay. All right.
And
So
we could
first,
talk about this forever.
I know, right? Okay, so I'm going to start off pretty small. We talked about Partagaz a little bit and how wonderful his listening to Nemec's speech and his inability to control that and how he's reconsidering his life. Then let's switch things up and go to one of the rebels. How about Clea, her ending? So she comes back disoriented from from Coruscant, doesn't fit in Yavin, doesn't have the hero's welcome that Cassian said she might. She's kind of lost, and she gets the first half of that Nemec speech that we see, then the back half connected to Partagaz. She gets the half about sometimes you may feel that you're lost, and it's the same speech that the part of the speech that Cassian was listening to when he first got back to Ferrex after learning that his mother died. And he's kind of starting to think about his role in the possible rebellion. So she's got to reevaluate and decide whether or not she does have a role. And then she has a moment with Val. And Val notices how lost she is, and Clea still has the Luthen imperative to do the right thing or to do what is right for the cause. And she says to Val, it had to be done when she talks about killing her father. And Val's response was, it gets tiring saying that, doesn't it?
Hmm.
And then Clea goes to sleep and she wakes up and the sun is shining and she looks outside and she sees, she came in the night before so she didn't really see, but now she sees. And I'm wondering if
Hmm.
now she's seeing that there's a possibility for, oh, I forgot the important thing. What does Val tell her when Clea says, oh, I don't know where I am? Val responds with, quoting, I have friends everywhere. You are among friends.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I
So,
don't remember, but I don't think she smiles at any point. Like we don't see.
oh, you got to pay extra for the smile.
Yeah. Clea
No,
never
no, no. But I mean,
smiles.
but what I wonder is the lesson from Clea and Luthen, for example. So Luthen dies, and at least he gets to be done. But I wonder, because Clea to me looked completely broken. Like what? By the time she gets to Yavin.
Broken, but then I think she's resuscitated at the end. And I think
Well,
her
I wonder
waking up.
about that. Yeah, part of what I wonder is she looks at it, but I wonder if she's one of the examples we need to see that sometimes there are going to be things that break on this quest. Like,
Adam, what's your thought? Is she broken or is she resuscitated?
Yeah. I think they purposely left it a little ambiguous in the show. And I struggled with that scene, trying to,
All right.
see
Okay. Well, we
what
got to
her
keep rolling.
resolution
I'm on
was.
the side that she's completely resuscitated. Okay. Next, let's go to,
I'm potentially on the scene that she's coming back, like she's
okay, on the
seeing
way
what's
back, on the way
happening.
back.
Yes, yeah.
All right. How about Dedra? Let's talk about that last moment. And we see her
Oh.
in maybe a Narkina prison, wearing the same jumpsuit that Cassian did, and the lights go out on her and she crumples. Why was that the perfect ending? What
it
did you think
felt
of it?
perfect, and I'm trying to justify
Yeah,
the feeling
exactly.
because, like,
Same,
I saw that I was like, oh
same.
my God, like
That
it just
was.
felt cohesive, but I haven't found the words yet to explain
I'm
why.
wondering if it fits exactly what she wants in her worldview.
Oh,
What does
the
she want?
order.
Order.
Whoa.
Order.
Right.
Yes.
But she
Uh,
sees finally what that really means,
well,
right?
so
No
yeah,
choice.
Yeah.
the combination of the lights going out and her collapsing, which
Yeah.
we've never seen. I mean, the scene where she meets Cyril's mother and she smiles, Amy and I were like, "Oh my God, that was so creepy." I mean, like she's so tightly controlled, and
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 she breaks down.
and she breaks down, and I think, yeah, yeah. Um, I think it is. It's the same thing that happens with Cyril. I was the baddie. I really was.
But I think you're right, Luke. You nailed it. It's she the reason she's been so gung ho for the Empire is she views the other side as chaos.
Mhm,
Well, here is the perfect form of control.
mhm,
She gets to witness it,
mhm,
experience it, not everything
mhm.
she hoped for.
Yeah. Um, just one more thing with her. I think just think of a distinction between because I had trouble or with the differentiating between her and Cyril. Are they essentially the same character? But I think there's a slight difference. I think in for her, fear dominates her. Fear. And that's what we get when she no longer has control, she is afraid. And for Cyril, he's more genuine. He has been trying to pursue his life for a positive value, not trying to cover up his fear by going after this chaos. He fell in love with Dedra because he loves beauty and order. And so and I think that's why he also liked the rebels on Gorman. He appreciated their enthusiasm, their passion, and there's a suggestion that he kind of bonded with them. And so I think he's coming across that his explicit values are at odds with his spirit. And he's like, "Who am I?" And when Cassian asks, "Who are you?" he doesn't know. Let's keep going here. How about Vel? So Vel has this kind of reunification with Clea and a reunification with Cassian, and they toast. She reluctantly but goes ahead and toasts Luthen, and then they toast everyone else along the way. Um, and I love the line where she replies to Cassian saying, I've met a lot of people who said that they were at Aldani," and she says, "Well, if I ever hear that from anybody, I'll kill them." Kind of reinforcing that idea that the rebellion has been around a long time, and there are a lot of newcomers who don't realize where the roots are.
Hmm.
But Vel ends up still kind of not being on the side of Luthen, but having fully integrated herself into the breakfast scene with Mon Mothma among the troops and finding her place there. What do you think of Vel? Is that a nice bookend for her?
Yeah, because I think she was broken with the loss of Cinta.
Yeah.
I think she lost her way. Um, and um, and I think that shows
Oh,
her reconnecting.
yeah. And
Uh,
Well, and
reconnecting
Val
enough.
was never fully in, like, I always got the impression Val was part of the rebellion for Cinta. She was following Cinta. Um,
And Senta was helping her be a
Cinta,
part of the rebellion.
Cinta was there. She's
Yeah.
like, the rebellion comes first.
Yeah.
We get the scraps that are
Yeah,
left over.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, Adam, what you're saying is making me think, oh, shoot, it just left my mind. Um, yeah, I forgot it.
It's
Uh, okay, let's keep going to wrap up. Okay. Um, let's go with Mon Mothma. Mon Mothma, her ending here is basically she supports Cassian with supporting Luthen. That this is true because she hears it from Vel and she hears it from Cassian and all these people that she trusts. And then she is also there at the breakfast among the soldiers that she's helping to fight with, having found their, you know what it's making me think of? Their community. Just like on Mina Rao, the planet where all the farmers are kind of gathered around the table. So you've got this communal, this circle that they have now formed. It's not just an army. It's a new community.
one thing I get from Mon Mothma in the end in the last episode is I think she kind of picks up Luthen's torch a little bit in that she understands she's a politician, so she understands she has to keep this alliance together. But I'm trying to remember if this was Rogue One or or Andor, but I think at one point she goes behind their backs a little bit. Like she orchestrates, she puts on one face towards the Alliance because she needs to hold it together, but then she quietly makes it so things can happen behind the scenes.
Maybe
And
with
so,
sending Vel to go ask or talk to
yeah,
Cassian. Yeah.
right. And she's kind of trying to make she gets some of the bigger picture. And I think she has that transformation during the
A better
rebellion scene.
example, a
Mhm.
better
Yeah,
example,
yeah.
Return of the Jedi. Many Bothans died to get us this information on the second Death Star.
Mm,
So
Remember,
wait, how's that? What is that an example of exactly?
she's now part of the
Oh,
rebellion. She's willing to make the tough
I
decisions
see.
that
To
mm,
be
people
a leader.
have to die.
Yeah.
She remember, so
Yeah.
this is the significance of
Because
and
she's the one that probably ordered them.
to die.
Yep.
right.
Yeah.
She did. She did. She was in charge of the mission to get,
There you go.
and this is the significance of when Cassian says, "Welcome to the rebellion." I think
Yeah.
that final scene is her, she's not being welcomed. She is now fully part of the
She is
rebellion.
now part of the
Mm,
rebellion
And
there.
oh, that's
She's
good.
yeah, yeah,
that Luthen had she in that respect, she has picked
yeah,
up Luthen's
yeah,
torch.
yeah.
She is the leader of the rebellion now in the way that Luthen was in the beginning. This
Okay. All right. Well, let's three more characters. Oh, and this, I
is
mean, we could do like a full hour in each of these. We've done a lot of with Luthen. Already done a lot of with Luthen. He dies at the hand of his daughter. What do you
Hmm.
think? This for me might be the most perfect ending of all of them. This is what he's been fighting for, and here I'm gonna a tribute to Luthen. We've mentioned this speech several times. I'm sorry. I'm gonna take eat up more of your time here. I'm gonna read this, but read it in context of that final. I'm reading it and think of it in context of that final episode and his bond with Clea. Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. Think of that face that he has at the very end when she removes the breathing device in his face. Do you remember his face there? Kind of getting some
Yeah.
calmness. I've made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago from which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, they set me on a path from which there is no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost. And he mentions that there are lots of false saviors, like when talking about Take Homa. And by the time I looked down, there was no longer any ground beneath my feet. Well, you know who was the ground beneath her feet? His feet.
Clea. But
What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Adam, that's thinking so long term, isn't it? And the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. And we know that we see finally that light of gratitude after he's passed and Clea kisses him. So, what do I sacrifice? Everything.
oh,
All right, real quick. Um, Cassian, we see his arc resolve in Rogue One. Anything, and we talked a little bit about his walking confidently, moving forward, having that, maybe also having that glimpse of the Force healer. And he is now fully the man who has come to grips with who he is, with the Luthen side of him, and you could say the Mon Mothma side of him, Mon Mothma Vel himself side of him in there that wants to be human, wants to have a life, wants to be concerned, but also seeing the longer term of things. Okay, last one, Bix. So Bix ends up with Cassian's child on the planet of Mino Rao in the wheat fields that we saw at the beginning of the season where they were living together. I guess as more than husbands and wife now. And she's staring off, and her last words are, as the child starts to whimper a little bit, "It's okay. It'll be okay." Any final comments or thoughts, either in Cassian or Bix's endings? And
Yeah, so
watching that last scene of Bix in connection with what we know is going to happen with Cassian,
yeah,
we know it's
That's
going to be
why I
okay.
had to watch Rogue One, I think, and New
yeah,
Hope. Like, because the whole one of the lines that keeps coming back is make not is it worth it, make it worth it.
Make it with it.
yeah.
Um, and so you see, like, make that worth it,
Yeah.
right? He's never gonna know that son, never gonna get to be with Bix again. We know that. So it feels just unresolved unless you see like that's the only thing that makes that worth it and not soul crushing to see.
Well, but it also captures, really nicely, the the good, what makes the good. It's
Mm.
at the end of the day, it is, the focus on, she's among wheat, food, among, life. It's the focus on life and moving forward and the future, and
And little droids running around playing and having
Oh, that
fun.
was yeah.
All right, let's wrap this up. Final thoughts about these three episodes, or the whole of the second season, or the whole of the the entire series. The shorter than we wanted it to be. Joseph, I'll have you start with that.
I was just brilliant. I'm so excited to give it a bit of space and then go back and rewatch it because there's not many shows that have been the combination of so entertaining, so rich in detail, but also have brilliant concretes to capture ideals. Um, I'm very excited to just have this.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joseph. And Adam, how about you?
Yeah, one of the really awesome things about Andor was that Rogue One was a great movie. And one of the things that made it a great movie is that it was the first m real war movie in Star Wars. It's the Dirty Dozen in Star Wars. And and they could have made Andor just, another war movie, right? Or more, I mean, a war story. They could have made it, just, all right, let's tell the story of the war. And the way that Andor is a is a story about the war between the between the Rebel Alliance and the Empire. And they did it. They actually used this as an opportunity to really build out the universe, to take the promise of Star Wars of as pop culture and turn it into art. And that's what really made it just such an incredible experience and deserving of being watched again and again and again.
And Adam, I'll echo that. I think I'll be watching this like I reread my favorite novels over the years, over and over again, to see all the subtleties, to combine things together from the first season to the second season, from the first moments to the last moments, and to see how they are all influenced with each other. And I want to thank Tony Gilroy for writing an email to Kathleen Kennedy saying basically you shouldn't do a Star Wars show, and this is why it won't work, and if there was one to be done, this is how it should be done. And Kathleen Kennedy, thank you to you for giving the green light to Tony Gilroy for doing this. And I'll wrap up with this. Joseph, thank you very much for participating in all these talks that we've had, and I'm going to try to rope you into at least one more. And Adam, you ISB agent, Adam, please tell your supervisor, Leo Partagaz, that we will not calibrate our enthusiasm for Andor. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.